Hey there, everyone. We're back. This is episode 2 of the Accelerating Digital Delivery podcast. And I'm here with Matt Goddard again. And Matt, last time we spoke about some really high level principles, the principles you use to drive your business. And we had trust, clarity, visibility, and consistency. And we talked about the importance
Yeah.
of, but that was all pretty high level kind of stuff. And you've written an article. There's an article out this week that really takes that high level kind of stuff and drills right down to show how one of those principles, in particular consistency,
Yeah.
can sort of be enabled on a day-to-day basis, because it's all very well talking about this sort of high level stuff, but we want to know what it actually looks like on the ground and how it helps you deliver digital delivery at an accelerated sort of pace. So we're going to talk about that today.
Yes, we are. Yeah, we're going to be talking about something that we call accelerators, which is about how to create consistent delivery, which is awesome. Just on your point there, Nick, I think what's interesting is that hopefully over time, what everyone will see is all of these things are reinforcing each other.
Yeah.
So there's, obviously consistency is a key element. We've got a mindset thing and practical explanation, which is talking about today. That also reinforces other principles or guidelines that we have within our business in order to stop, sort of people getting out or into the incorrect mind space.
Yeah. Yeah. So with accelerators then, when we were talking before we started, you were saying really that, I mean, accelerators solve a particular problem that you see a lot in, let's say, less functional development teams.
Yeah. Well, in the work that we do, where we deliver software systems for our clients, you can often get into a situation where consistency or using the same tool set is seen as boring, or it's something that it doesn't keep the interest of the developers that are working on it, and that creates a risk. So what happens is a lot of people will try and say, well, actually on this one we can use this framework, we can do this really on this project, we can use this new framework, and we can do this really cool thing, and everything's amazing. But in my opinion, I think that's a terrible idea, because what we then lose is all of the experience and the learn lessons of that, of our experience with the older frameworks, and therefore we are not able to accelerate our delivery process because we're having to learn new things. And I've seen it time and time again, Nick, I'm sure you have as well, where people grasp these new tools and they wonder why something it takes them 10 weeks to do, whereas originally it would have taken them a couple of weeks to do.
Yeah, and it can be a real, I mean, obviously I ran a web agency for a long time. I mean, really from the relatively early days of the web, the kind of the mid 90s. One of the issues with that is that there's always something new. There's always
Yeah,
something better. And I think that's worth saying. I mean, this is related to something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, isn't it? But it's worth
that's correct.
saying that when we're looking at these kind of shiny objects, there is always a reason why it might be, might be worthwhile. It might be better. There is a reason why I think, in lots of cases we might want to do something in a different way. But what we're not so good at measuring is the cost.
Yes, it's the cost, it's the impact of making the change, but also the appropriateness of just making that change anyway. We have a guiding principle, not one of the principles of accelerated delivery, but some sort of, the guidelines that we use to make our decisions about what we're going to do in the business. And one of our guidelines is we don't experiment on our customers' codes. And the reason we don't experiment on our customers' code is because what we know is that in order to deliver successfully high quality product that we can deliver quickly and sustainably, and to get them the outcome that they need as quickly as possible, is we need consistency. And we can only
Yeah.
get consistency if we're using a standard set of tools, which means that we can create repeatable sort of actions throughout our development process. That means that that product will be successfully delivered. If you switch, so let's say, as a practical example, let's say you're a .NET company.
Mm.
.NET is a fantastic software development language created by Microsoft, but also it's not sexy at all. People don't want to work in. I've heard people I've worked with, I've heard say, "Oh no, that's a problem because that's in .NET." You know, it's not a problem because it's in .NET. It's just that's the language that it's in.
Like
So what's
weirdly
happened?
pattern orientated, the
Yeah.
digital development world.
So then what a lot of people try to do is say, okay, well, we'll use something like React, or we'll use Next.js, or one of those more modern JavaScript frameworks. There's probably in the time that we've recorded this and deliver it, there'll be another new JavaScript framework that people can choose to use now, which will be the next best thing. But in the practical sense, so you can switch from one to the other, but the all of the tacit knowledge that you have about the language, about the components that you're using, the controls you're using, the DevOps, the distribution tools that you use, you now, by making that change because you want to go to, use a sexier language, or you want to do something different, you've lost all of those accelerators. You've lost all of
Yeah,
those bits of all those assets that you have, um, to enable you to get further down the road,
yeah,
delivery when you start. And that's my problem with this, because like you said, with the Dunning-Kruger effect, it depends on the literature you read how sort of scientific that particular approach is. But the reality is it doesn't matter that it may not be robust. What matters is we see the effects. So when you start something
yeah.
new, you think to yourself, well, this is going to be easy, because I've looked at these examples and I think, oh, it's going to be great. I've looked at this and I can do that easy. I'm a senior developer. I can do that.
Yeah.
The trouble is you don't know what you don't know, and you only discover that through doing. And at that point, you then think to yourself, well, that's not going to be quite as easy as I thought it was going to be. And from that point onwards, in Dunning-Kruger, they say you enter the valley of despair, which I think is a great way of like, oh my God, why does everyone show a blog template as an example when that's not, no one creates blogs. Anyway, you go through this cycle, and then it takes you a long time to get to what they call the uh, plateau of sustainability, or you sort of make your way learning and reinforcing ideas, adapting what you previously know into the new mindset. And you eventually get good at it. Of course you do. But you cost a lot of time, you cost a lot of money behind. Your project is already behind because
Yeah.
you made that decision to change your technology. It might not be a framework, it could just be a new component, or it could be a new, just a small new way of doing something. But my belief is that these things that may seem boring and standardized and just that's the way we do it and stuff like that, they are actually the things that make you effective. They are the things that drive you um, further down the delivery life cycle, and they drive you to a much more expedient outcome.
Maybe that's the thing. I mean, the plateau of sustainability does not sound like a sexy place to live, does it? But if you're trying to actually deliver things on time and on budget and to understand, I mean, that obviously that makes a big difference. Okay, so let's talk about the opposite of that then. If the problem is that we all love new shiny things and we get kind of kind of entranced by them,
Yeah.
um, and that's the problem. What's the solution? You talked earlier on about accelerators. Let's talk a bit about what accelerators. What do you mean by an
Well,
accelerator?
an accelerator is like any tool, any component, any process or system that you can use repeatedly to get consistently good results that inevitably then lead you further and further down the chain of delivery.
Okay.
Let's say, for example, you've got you always set up an authentication mechanism, for example, in your web projects. If you can then scaffold that so that you can just run a command that says, like run authentication, and then that would just scaffold and framework that whole piece out. Well, that's a whole load of stuff you don't then need to do. It might be configuration options, but you've suddenly taken, I don't know, like 6 weeks, 7 weeks of work, and you've done it in 10 minutes. I mean, obviously, you've done the 7 weeks of work, the 10 weeks of work to get
Yeah.
it into a place where you can create a scaffolding out of that. That's an accelerator. I mean, we've so far we've talked a lot about development accelerators, but then you've got, for example, we've implemented the para methodology for organizing knowledge management. So that's projects, areas, resources and archives. We use that organization principle in Notion, in emails. We use it in our SharePoint file storage system. And what that means is that everybody knows where to go for any piece of information they need. If it's a live project they're working on right now, they know to go in the projects document. They know, if there's, something that you do consistently for somebody, but it's not a project like one of the things that we do for one of our clients is we send out discount code emails to their employees once a month. So that's not a project, but it is part of our areas of responsibility for 3. So we know to go to the areas file, we go into the client folder, and then, all the information we need is there. Now, what's interesting about this is we aren't saying it's one system to rule all. We aren't putting everything inside Notion and attaching all the documents and everything we need inside Notion. What we're doing is we're creating a consistent file and organizational structure, which means that, all of our files can be in SharePoint, but we always know where they are.
So
And so there's no...
You can still put your assets in the best place for that particular kind of asset.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And this is one of the things that we've spoken about a lot, Nick, and it's something that we've tried to really demonstrate in the article. There are big accelerators. There is the known development framework. There is the scaffolding of key pieces of infrastructure and code that you're going to need to do. It's consistent deployment processes. Then you've got sort of the midweight stuff, which has a massive amount of impact. Things like using a consistent organizational methodology like we do with Para. I mean, that's quite a big change. You've got to do a lot to get it in there, but once you do it, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then you've got much smaller things. And these are the things that I think at the end of the day make up the biggest elements of acceleration in the delivery process. Because if you have lots of small things that are saving you 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, and you add that up over a day, you get significant, I want to say time savings. I should probably say acceleration in the work that you're doing. But I mean, ultimately, it sort of equates to the same thing, really, at the end of the day. I mean, we've got some great examples in there about, sort of shortcuts on how to use shortcuts on the people you email frequently, or how to set up your desktop environment so that it is, for a given task, it's orientated in exactly the way that you need it to be. These are all accelerators. And I want people to understand the best thing that anyone can take away from what we're talking about right now is that if you look at what you're doing, you look at the things that I suppose it's a bit like the automation process, isn't it? Like everyone wants to use,
mindset.
And it's to look at what you're doing and working out how you can turn those repeatable actions into an asset that becomes a benefit to you and your business because it accelerates your drive forward.
Yeah.
It accelerates your ability to do your work.
Or even just returning things to that kind of smart default where you're at
Yes.
you're going back to a point where I mean we talked about the desktop, the kind of the desktop reset, and having things come up in the place where on your monitor or whatever it is, your screen, and just having that kind of clarity to get on, start doing your work, or typing a couple of characters and getting your email address because you have to type that a lot, that kind of stuff, isn't it?
It's taking advantage of muscle memory and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you can create a smart default about how you want your working space to be, and you can just switch into that and automatically reset, then you don't have to think because okay, well, my notes are up here, or the way I get to my assets is down here, and you automatically know. You don't need to think about it anymore. And ultimately what we want to get to is a place where the way that we do our work is accelerated, and we're taking advantage of these assets and these components that we can use to speed us along.
Yeah.
What that should do is then create some free time. And when you create free time, I'd say in quotes, but where you're not on project time, I suppose is a better way of saying it. When you create not on project times, what you can then do is experiment with new things. You can learn away from your client projects, what works, what doesn't work. You can learn how to integrate new technologies or new systems into what you're doing. And then what you can do is once you have ironed out all the kinks that would be corrosive to the client delivery process, you can then, we call it graduation, but what you do is you graduate that system, that tool, that environment back into your main flow. So you can do that in a much more controlled way than if you had just decided that, oh, we're going to, just implement this on this project because we want to give our team a learning opportunity. Because I think that you're prioritizing, the problem there is you're prioritizing the wrong thing. It's going to sound
On a
awful to
client
say, but
project. Yeah, yeah,
you're prioritizing your business over your client. And actually, if you want if you want to build trust and you want long-term relationships with your client, then actually, there has to be a balance. You can't prioritize one over the other.
it's really interesting because obviously sometimes you do need to change. Sometimes it is worth the
Yes.
pain. But I really like that distinction about, when are you going to work on that? Are you going to work on it on a client project where you have a set deadline, you have a set budget, the client has a particular expectation which you've given them? No, you're not going to do it then, but you're making time to investigate the things that look like they might be really useful.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And I
Yeah.
think it's really important. I mean, you're right. It's really important that we give our businesses, our teams, the ability to explore, experiment, try new things,
Yeah.
see how they move. And that has to happen. That's the nature of digital work.
Yeah,
But
otherwise,
it
we'd
needs to
probably still
happen.
be building Flash websites, wouldn't we?
Well, absolutely, yeah. Well, if that ever comes back in fashion, I think that will be highly sought after. The reality, like you say, the reality there is that, you do one in a high risk environment or you do one in a low risk environment.
Yeah.
And I think we owe it to our clients to not put their projects at risk in that way.
Yeah. And I mean, it is our clients, isn't it? But it's also our long-term business interests, obviously.
Yeah,
Those,
absolutely.
those things go hand in hand if you're working in the right way.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I suppose I'm using shorthand to accelerate the discussion because we're um, you know, like our assumption is by building trust, one of our other principles that we are building long-term relationships with our customers.
Yeah.
And if you build long-term relationships with your customers, then your business has got much more opportunity to survive and thrive over the long term. And
Yeah.
that's my contention. But and I think that accelerators are the way to go about marrying up the pressures of your ability to deliver for your clients and the expectations about when and how that aligns to budget and stuff like that. I feel like focusing on this will drive all of our businesses forward in a way that is conducive to that environment.
And I mean, it's really about building the mindset, isn't it? It's about building that kind of accelerate. I mean, because you obviously do a lot of things that are quite big, like the framework accelerators or taking authentication and writing in with a line. But I mean, it's something we can all do. And you talked about the little stuff as well. It's about how
Yeah.
can we turn that thing that we do often into sort of less work or no work. And
And it's
I can't leave the discussion without just giving a nod to checklists, which I mean, are the
yeah,
classic example of something that stops us making mistakes, takes us through a
like
process, and
I absolutely agree. In fact, if you weren't going to bring it up, I was going to loop back round to checklists because they are so important, and they're important for. I think there's two good reasons for checklists. One is of consistency of execution. So the other thing is quite often you will do things on a more sporadic time period. If you do things once a year or once every 6 months or maybe once a quarter, and you haven't codified those actions into a checklist that that is repeatable and that you've done everything you need to do, then you're really missing a trick because there are things that we do in the areas of our clients, sorry, in our knowledge management system, in our areas where we have our client folders,
yeah,
we have a standard operating procedures section. And in the standard operating procedures section, we have things like weekly tasks, monthly tasks, quarterly tasks, and yearly tasks. And each of those Documents are a set of standard operating procedures for things that we need to do on a time-based element for our clients. And each one of those have to be a checklist because it might be that I'm not actually available. If I'm constantly doing that and I remember how to do it,
Yeah.
which is, like, we know how memory's fallible anyway, because, if you've got so much going on, you don't remember all the small steps. Then, or if I'm not available, somebody else can follow that checklist and make sure that we get something done appropriately.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's those, they are the little things, they're the disciplines which really drive change as well.
Yeah, and I think when you have that, and obviously we're talking about accelerators, but it's all part of the same thing. You have that. Yes, it's consistency, it's predictability, it's cost efficiency. You might say, there are things that really matter, and you also get that time, I suppose, to focus on the things that matter most, that you're really,
Yeah.
that you are really expert in. If you don't need to be redoing all this stuff all the time, you get to put your attention, your client's money, your client's budget, where it kind of matters most.
Yeah. And also, and this is as important as all those things, it's less stressful.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Wow. Unstressful
Like,
project development.
yeah,
Interesting.
it's just
What a
literally,
concept.
yeah. If you set yourself up for success, if you use those accelerators, if you're using a consistent set of tools and frameworks that you know is going to drive you further down the delivery life cycle than you would be if you were doing everything from scratch, then you're just less stressed because you
Yeah.
don't have to worry about whether something is going to work or not. You know it's going to work because you battle tested it across multiple projects.
Yeah, it's going to work. That's pretty powerful, actually, isn't it? You just know
Yeah,
it's going to work. Yeah. Oh, well, it sounds like this is a topic we should come back to in a future episode. Maybe we can drill down into one of the specific accelerators to see it.
I'd love to show some examples of all the different accelerators that we've got, and so help people to create some of their own, or to think about how they can incorporate that sort of thinking into their project delivery life cycle.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, if you're watching this, I'm going to put a link in the show notes below to the article, so you can see in the article, Matt's got some screenshots of some of the different processes we've talked about, give you a better idea. But check back on the podcast or the video on YouTube, and in the future there'll be more episodes where we focus on some of these specific things. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Thanks, Matt. Good
Thank you
conversation.
very much.
And yeah, see you next time.
See you later. Bye bye.
Bye.